Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Gonzalo, and I've been with Jigsaw since 2020. Many of you might know me from my previous role as a customer support manager. I recently transitioned into heading up our marketing efforts, and I'm really excited to be the host of this session today. Today we got something very special lineup. Joining us is Bogdan Stoichescu. I hope I pronounced that right.
You pronounced it
um,
very well. Thank you, Gonzalo.
Thank you, thank you. So, someone with a truly unique perspective of what separates elite traders from the rest, right? He spent 3 years in the Axia futures trading floor in London, quietly observing how 10 professional prop traders consistently pulling 7 and 8 figure incomes. What he found was pretty eye-opening. While most of us are busy trying to perfect our entries or manage trades better, these top traders are solving completely different problems, right? Bogdan captured all of this in his book, Traders of All Time, co-author with Axios co-founder Alex Haywood. He's also the founder and editor of Asymmetrist, where he continues to sit on Axios London trading floor, writing about trading culture development and real trader stories. Really cool job. Okay, we'll keep the Q&A to the end, but you can type it anytime on the Q&A section you have below. With that, let me hand it over to Bogdan, and I hope you enjoy the session.
Absolutely, Gonzalo. Thank you so much. If you
Thank you,
apologize, the last of the teething issues, guys, I'll just very, very quickly pop up my slide deck. Let's see if this will not break absolutely everything. Have we successfully transitioned to the slide deck? I believe we have. Yeah, looks all good. And without further ado, I think I've baked everything in the slide deck. So once again, thank you for your time, guys. I massively appreciate everyone taking the time to be here, wherever you are from around the world. Gonzalo, thank you, and thank you to Jigsaw for hosting all this. I recognize some of the names as well in the audience, so thank you as well, guys, for coming. And let's get cracking. So, as you've probably seen, as you've learned, as you might have seen around, this is session 1 of multi-sessions with Jigsaw that we're doing. So because we have the opportunity to go wide and deep, it is very important to keep in mind today I'm going very wide and gunning around the book. I'm gunning around everything we observe on the Axia desks, just so then we actually get to a much more applied layer in the next sessions. So for this session, it will seem like we're going like so far down the rabbit hole, so to speak, but for very, very good reasons. And, normally I think you'll see how it works holistically today, but just generally for all the series, and of course, all with the intention to have a very, very concerted, how should I put this, a much more holistic view on the markets and operating within the markets, trading in and around the markets, and so on and so forth. So, in one slide, that's everything you need to know about trading, about the markets, about this whole thing of ours. I am being a bit flippant, but truly, 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 I think those of you who will spend years and years and years, maybe one day you'll come back to this slide and realize that after all is said and done, this is probably the most truest image of trading and market navigation that there's ever been put on a lithograph. And this lithograph is by MC Escher or Escher. And hopefully by the end of this series, you will see exactly what I mean. For those of you who've indulged and read the book, which I'll explain in a bit, you will also see what I mean. But hopefully, again, this is a standalone series and you'll understand exactly why. So here's one before we depart from our dear friend Escher or Escher. Another image to wrap your head around of what it is like to trade, to navigate, which I'm sure I am preaching to the choir because I'm sure you've all experienced this kind of market navigation, a wonderful world where we trade on future expectations, but that very future manifests on what we do today. And so a wonderful paradox begins, and all things start from there. So thinking about where things start from, thinking upstream, going to the source. I think you'll see me saying all this phrase. You might have seen me say it before. You might have seen it, talk about it endlessly. And it's very fundamental. I mean, if there's one package, if there's one sentence I could put in a bottle, send it back in time to myself, when I first sort of began this difficult journey of trading, it would be just to send myself this screenshot here or this slide here as a priming mechanism, as a function. If you, at any time you're suffering and don't understand what's going on in trading and you're not seeing progress, always just think, am I thinking upstream enough? Because often we get lost in the details when the meta, the higher level view dominates everything else. And again, I'll explain what I mean by that sentence as we go through the slides. But thinking upstream, thinking about the very nature of what we're doing as traders, understanding that requires understanding what the markets really are and the landscape we are navigating, as a reference to the book's subtitle. In that, markets are here to be navigated, not solved. And the problem is that we, myself included, learned this through many mistakes. Come into this game or into this world on the assumption that markets are here to be solved for many different reasons. Mainstream academia, economics, a huge part of the financial industry tell you that the markets are here to be solved. They solved it, so park your money in a private index fund, please, because we solved it better than you have. But indeed, at least as it is to us, you can only believe and see, and hopefully I will somewhat convince you, and I say that in quotation marks, that markets are here to be navigated, and your entire world has to shift into thinking, how can I be a better market navigator to develop my market navigation skills, as opposed to being obsessed with solving markets now and forever. And again, I'll keep coming back into a big loop about this sentence in different ways. So here is a bit of a menu in what we'll cover in this webinar tonight. In this series, we'll keep coming back to these concepts, other ones too. And I haven't put them in order because we won't approach them in order. We'll come back to them, as I said, in series 2 and 3. We'll look at individual traders much more specifically and review these kinds of concepts and more as we do it. But just so you know what's awaiting you. But before we go into that, some of you may not know who I am. What is Axia? What is this book about? Who the hell are these guys? So I'm not going to leave you guys hanging for the whole show. So at the top left of the screen, you will see a trading floor, and that's the first floor in London, literally the floor above where I'm now. I'm in a compact room here at one of the desks, but that is the first floor in London on the Axia desks. That is a younger version of me quite a few years ago with slightly shorter hair at the top right. And that is myself and Alex, somehow the only picture we took of ourselves on that whole trip, where we were accidentally matching our trousers and tops and clothes. And that picture was taken in the Razor's office, the Razor being one of the traders in the book. I will explain that more in a second, where we interviewed a few of the guys. So in a round loop, Axia Futures is a big worldwide outright futures trading firm team. And that is exactly the way we're examining everything in the book. It is our world. It is my world. Everything we do and trade and think about trading and think about training is within our outright futures trading space. And what does outright mean? Outright as opposed to spread trading. Spread trading is a very different ballgame in many respects. We're outright traders first. When I say spread trading, and if you don't know what that is people who engage in trying to make profit out of the differences between two contracts or more. So for example, buying January crude oil and selling December crude oil, as opposed to trading directionally in the way we do, being outright traders. So basically, I grew up on the Axia desks, and then Alex said, hey, why don't we do this book together? And this book was as following. We've got this whole group of guys at the time. So this is a few years ago. Obviously, a few years ago, the team has grown exponentially since then. But at the time, we just said, look, we've got these 10 guys at the desks, all of them, minimum 7 figures, some of them 8-figure traders, some of them in the running, dare we say, if things coalesce in their private lives, in their careers, in the markets to be in the running to become nine-figure traders. In which case, these are the traders that you meet throughout the book, and some of the traders I'll be referencing in these series, and the traders who are literally upstairs or in a few different offices. You might be wondering what the hell are these aliases? These aliases were basically one to give people the right for being anonymous. Some people will take off their anonymous mask in the future, and you'll know more about them. Some people will keep it. But I do think there's an advantage because, as I said, once you read the stories of these people, I think they're far more memorable as their alias rather than their name. And you can see a suggestive picture of some of them on this slide here. Again, all on the first floor, capture them throughout the years. And so when I refer to the Razor, the Collector, the Adventurer, and so on, these are the people we're talking about, the guys at the Axia desks that are in the book and everything we've learned from them. So we were saying, okay, let's do the book. 9 months, what could be so hard? But 3 years and 7 months later, finally came out the book in March 2025, as you can see on the left. And there is, if you haven't had enough of my face, a little portrait of myself. But you can also see a little portrait of Alex, who is the co-author of this book. So myself and Alex are the co-authors. And Alex Haywood I'll start with Alex first. We were a very interesting team doing this book together in more ways than one, co-authoring it. Alex has, shall we say, has the top-down approach. So he's someone who has started on the London prop scene early 2000s, 2004, 5, around there, perhaps even earlier, if I'm not mistaken. Very early days himself as a trader, then went on to lead and build numerous trading teams. And then ended up being Axia's co-founder when Axia was co-founded in 2016. And so he brought this very I've seen the careers of so many traders, and there's so many lessons I want to put down. Let's put it into the book, and let's do it together. And so for myself, again, I had this sort of a journeyman kind of approach. So, same with me. I came into this weird nebulous world that is trading. How do I make it a career? How do I get into prop? Now that I was on the prop desk, the Axia desk, since 2019, I traded there. And then, as I said, Alex presented me the opportunity saying, hey, look, you can get unlimited access to all these top guys, potentially the best guys in the futures space, at least in Europe. Do you want to do it? I was like, sure, why not? What could be so hard and what could take so long? And that's how anything ever starts, of course. For many different and many interesting reasons we might talk about perhaps in the Q&A, but I have so much to get through now. I won't belabor the point. After the book was done, I'm actually back on the desks, but as something like a writer in residence, having launched and now running the Asymmetrist. And the Asymmetrist is more about, it's many things. It's developing too many things. It's capturing the stories of the guys firsthand, preserving those stories in real time. So it's continuing the book, and also it's perhaps turning into more of an open R&D department, but more on that later. All of this is to say, guys, is that basically the book, Axia, Asymmetrist, and everything I'm talking about is drawn from the source, is drawn from the well, directly from the trading floor, fresh, everything we observe. I talked to Alex an insane amount of time about so many things. We're always conferring, always discussing how can we improve the guys, how can we improve the space, a trillion million things. And it all goes into this series, into Asymmetrist and so on. And that's where I'm at now. So everything I discuss is directly off the floor. So now let's get into, or as the British say, let's get cracking. Let's talk about the fundamental misassumption. And I've already alluded to it, that everyone comes into trading on wanting to solve markets as opposed to navigating them, which is why we all look at the beginning of like, okay, what's the one thing to make me profitable? What's the one indicator? What's the one whatever? And everything unlocks itself, right? Which is just, again, fundamental misunderstanding, which is why it's important to, if you understand the upstream problem, you can deal with the downstream detail, which is, if you understand that it's a navigation thing, you will not be so determined to be like, okay, what's the secret sauce? Why can't I find the secret sauce? So I think this is a very important concept, which again will come back in a massive loop. And I hope people over time will really appreciate the importance of this message. For those of you who are early in their journeys, please internalize this as much as you can. Don't worry if you can't, or if you perhaps don't realize the context of this. It's something that really, really takes a long time to digest. You can always come back to this. But I really hope that in the long run, you will come back and realize how important this is. That markets are a complex environment and not a complicated environment. Something you'll read about at length with chapter 13 in the Sphinxes chapter in Traders of Our Time. And yeah, and as I alluded, like, this will help you answer your own questions, and it's foundational. And why I mentioned the Sphinx there is because, ironically, even though we were, it was the first interview we did back in when was it now? In September 2021. So that's how long we've been at work. Hundreds of hours of interviews, and also just, as I said, such long years, nearly 2 decades in Alex's case, of observing all these guys, and then myself observing them as, how the hell does any of this work? I'm going to ask these guys how all of this works, and we go from there. And the Sphinx is the kind of guy who, you ask him one question and he gives you three in return. So it was a very challenging interview for the first one of the series, but it probably was the most fundamental to understand. So that's why we ended with the beginning, or began with the end. So what does complex versus complicated means? This is what a lot of people think the markets are. That markets are a complicated environment. A bike may not be complicated, but in a way it is. It's complicated. There's a schematic. If you give someone the schematic, they can replicate the bike. There's a chain, there's pedals, set of wheels, a chair, handlebars, whatever. You can apply that to a racing car. Again, more complicated, but it's computable. You can put it into a blueprint, someone can replicate it. Okay. The whole point is, guys, is that if you take apart a bicycle and you put the bicycle back together again, it's going to be a bicycle, meaning that, crudely, we can say 1 + 1 = 2. Okay. Going on to discussing a bit more the importance of understanding what is a complicated environment, other than a bicycle. Let's talk about, for example, chess, Go, or some of you may recognize that screenshot, StarCraft, or other RTS games, and I put RTS and StarCraft as an example of esports. All three are intentionally put there because, famously, DeepMind and a lot of the, before this explosion of the GPT and all the hype involving AI and GPT and so on, before shall we say, the 2020s, now in the 2010s, it's crazy to say we can refer to the 2010s as the 2010s. Midway through, out came the news that, seemingly the computers can now beat the humans at chess, at Go, and then all of a sudden the shoe dropped when, StarCraft was on the execution block. For the seeming human participant, right? Although this carries a big nuanced caveat, I recognize there's a lot of caveats to understanding that story, but the entire point why there was dominance was that in each of these environments, they are static environments. The rules do not change. Fundamentally, you're always playing with the same pieces. Fundamentally, the board is the same, the maps are the same in StarCraft, okay, with the caveat that they change or don't change, but they are static. Meaning, you can compute, you can iterate your way to the best possible concurrent action. You can, quote unquote, solve these games, okay? Dare we say that chess, Go, and StarCraft is solved? There might be people telling me, damn, they're beautiful game, fair enough. But that is why the computer dominates in that situation. Moving on. What is a complex environment? A complex environment is a rainforest, is a weather system, is an ant colony, referring to that graphic in the middle. The important part about the complex system is it can self-organize spontaneously into patterns in the way flocks of birds and schools of fish can. Chaotic behavior is very prevalent it's a necessary feature of a complex environment, meaning that if you go all the way back to that bicycle example, if somehow you lived in a complex environment, when you put the parts back together again, you will be surprised. Meaning, any small deviation from the starting set of the initial conditions, which is the definition of chaotic environment, is that each time you put those parts back together again, you will be surprised. 1 + 1 = 3. And just by using those two examples, 1 + 1 = 2 in a complicated environment, and 1 + 1 = 3 in a complex environment, you can see where I'm going with this. Because when we trade, you're always thinking, man, I always thought that I thought, we're going to get 1 + 1 = 2. Then all of a sudden you're clued up. You go for the 1 + 1 = 3 trade. Then all of a sudden the markets do the 1 + 1 = 2 trade. Okay. That's like a fact of life. What else is a complex part of a complex environment? Fat-tailed behavior, meaning that if you have a normal distribution, which is predominantly modeled on much more static environments, is that if you assume a complex environment is distributed normally, the fat tails or like shocks to the system happen way more than you anticipate than you would in a normal distribution. Okay, so as we say, a once in a lifetime event happens monthly, quote unquote, in financial markets. Okay, somewhat of a flippant quote, but it's kind of true, and we've seen that a lot recently. Okay, which is why your biggest up days and your biggest down days happen in clusters, which is why uh, volatility begets volatility to the upside and to the downside. Most importantly for us is to see that adaptive interaction is a huge feature of a complex environment, and so is emergence. What does that mean? Is that if you see what I'm doing, I'm going to adapt to what you are doing. And then because we are doing something different now, other people are looking at what we're doing, so they adapt themselves in turn. And by doing so, it changes the very nature of what we're doing. Case in point with emergent properties. By trying to answer the question, by trying to answer the question changes in of itself. That far better is, that's just basically the reality of what markets are. They are complex, not complicated environment. And that means everything for your trading. It means everything for the way you navigate them, everything from the way you understand them. So everything comes back here. Everything in all these 4 parts I will do with Jigsaw. Everything that occurs in the book, everything that occurs on the floors, it all comes back here. So, as the slide says, markets are to be navigated, not solved, because in a complicated environment, you are solving them. And that is why we come in with the misassumption that markets are complicated, that markets are just a mere racing car, a mere bicycle, when in fact they are an ever-changing landscape of where change is the only constant. To better define it. So let me put a pin in this whole topic and go to something on the other side of the spectrum, to something highly applicable and relevant. Again, it's all tied at the hip. Because change is the only constant in a complex environment, you can't rely on having the best practices, the computable solution, because you might get to that point and then tomorrow the markets will change overnight. And that's the beauty of the markets, because they can trick you into thinking that they are a complicated environment, whereas they're complex. And that could happen for over a decade. The entire rise of the whole quant industry and the whole, the humans are dead, long live the computer, long live quants, and so on, is because markets were actually a very one-dimensional, a very static, low volatility environment for most of the 2010s. And it created a self-fulfilling prophecy. But again, that's the beauty of the markets. You can trick everyone to thinking they are static, one-dimensional. Everyone loads themselves in a certain direction. And don't you know it, everything changes overnight and we enter into a huge, crazy, multi-dimensional, multi-volatility environment. And that's where the human thrives and the sample set thinking, rule set thinking traders or automations get absolutely smashed. Which is why, again, observation is king. Observation is everywhere. Everything that you'll see. I kind of knew this intrinsically when I was, just myself a little fledgling on the floors, but just something that became so apparent with a lot of the guys in the book, on the floor, how keenly they're just master. They just observe beautifully, and they believe in their observations. They have conviction in their observations, and you can't represent observation and belief in it none other than the Razor, who you encounter in chapter 2. And in that chapter, he talks at length about the importance of observation, but that's because often people's observations are contaminated, and this is vitally important. And again, I only hope people will appreciate as they enter this domain, as they really get deep, years deep, they'll realize how important it is to preserve the purity of your observations, to back yourself on your observations, and not to rely on the observations of others. Of course, they help. Of course, you need to talk to others. Of course, you need to learn from others, but observation first. And that is because if you can observe, you can objectively identify various patterns, intertwine patterns with market phenomena. And I say that specifically because, unfortunately, the word pattern has been very abused over many, many, many years. I think it's a lot easier to think about it is like, okay, I'm on an alien world now. No one's been here before. My mission is to observe. No one can help me. What are some weird what are some weird phenomena on this alien world, which I then have to catalog? I may not understand why this phenomena occurs. I don't have to. I just have to catalog and just observe. And once you do collect that information, then you can start applying strategy to it, which is, as you can see on this graphic, then, observing is not so much the hard part. It's the subjective application strategy, meaning, applied for your circumstances, your constraints. Where are you in your career? What's the kind of risk you can tolerate? So on and so forth. And this is extremely important because, again, thinking upstream, it might seem very basic here, but it's actually the crux of so many people's problems because what is the situation 99% of the time? It's because people, traders, and guys, I know it might seem like I'm a bit. This is not a blame game here. I'm just saying these are diagnoses we've seen. I've seen. Alex has seen. We've realized with the book and so on. Like this is just more for just spot these commonalities. Is that you come into the game, rightly so, and you're like, okay, I need a strategy. Give me a strategy, guys. You try. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You try and think, uh, I'm here to solve markets. What's the best strategy that has solved the markets? I'm just going to do that. And all of a sudden, you've taken in a strategy you've copied from someone else. Fair enough to learn. You've got to do that. But it's so out of context. It's so unoptimized. You don't know all the permutations of that strategy. It's not personalized to you in any way, which is critical. Then the purity of your observations are contaminated. You have tunnel vision because now you're playing whack-a-mole into being like, well, okay, like where's the strategy going on? Oh, it's going here. Okay, I'm just going to smash that trade through that strategy. It's like it's been flipped around. Instead of observation first, you've gone strategy. And then you've gone strategy. That's now contaminated and changed the way you see observation. And then all of a sudden, every pattern you come across is very, you think it's, you see this discourse all the time. People be thinking that patterns are subjectives, that you can only trade a certain pattern a certain way. Like let's take out, the classic breakout or the classic fade, you break higher and you come back down or whatever. People think you can only trade that in a certain way. Why? Because the strategy that's been given to them gives them that assumption. They've been misapplying it. But actually, if you just think, okay, what are some classic market phenomena? I'll give you recent examples. Trump says something, he tweets something, boom, markets go haywire. We now have momentum, we have flow that have come into the markets, and then all of a sudden, depending where you are in this situation, we have markets move a certain direction, and slowly they come back, and they return to where everything started. In that entire sequence of events, it's exactly like a movie. A beginning, middle, and end, meaning that you can now skin that phenomena, that excursion of the market, in a million different ways. You can trade it on the initial outset of the comment. You can trade it when it comes all the way back to like a lot of people say, the scene of the crime. That is has to be decided by you. What are your skills? What is your constraints? What is the risk you can take on these kind of trades? Which, like some of the traders, they can take a huge amount of risk just hitting things outright because they're in a place in their career where they can take those kind of risks. You can't take those kind of risks if you are, if you're just a junior fledgling trader. Maybe you can, maybe you can't. Again, these are all downstream. The reason I keep telling you guys, maybe you can, maybe you can't. These are all downstream subjective things that you have to figure out. These are not upstream conversations. And the entire point of the book, everything I'm saying, everything in this series is we can only talk about the upstream things, which will dominate and answer these questions for you. So moving on to something I really like to explain here is, again, more of a framework, more of a way as a reminder. The more you move away from price ladder, from flow, from observing the markets firsthand, the market phenomena, the more your trading decays. Because more likely now, you're filtering your observation of pure market phenomena through chart patterns, through indicators, through what other people say. And you've put in all these layers in between what the markets are doing at this exact given time. What they did 5 minutes ago, what they did 5 months ago is basically irrelevant to a degree. It's what is it doing right now? What are you anticipating it to do right now? That is the most important part. How can you ensure that through your learning journey, learning and then moving from a learner to performer, you can come back and eradicate as many layers of abstractions, as many layers as you've built up to be as close to the market flow, observing things firsthand as much as possible. Okay, and so again, every time you add another layer, your trading decays, your trading performance decays, as a little tagline. Now, if any of this has been, have you noticed, there's an inherent contradiction to all we do. The life of a trader, as we said in the book, is a life of contradiction. No better summarized or explained by the trader's resource dilemma. A lot of you will be familiar because reading it or just talking about it, but it's extremely important because it is as follows: not giving yourself little time and little funds to learn and become a trader is just as bad, as we all know, as having too much time and too much money to learn and perform as a trader. And the reason it's just as bad is because there's so many different, because the whole domain is just so difficult. Because as you've seen lately with Trump, April was characterized by extremely long hours at the desks. I was there with the guys firsthand. I was writing about it in the Asymmetrist. Long hours at the desks. That's what it takes. If you have infinite time and infinite money, you will just say, "Why am I even doing this? Why? You might start making excuses. You might start not focusing on not focusing on the things you need to focus, not doing the boring stuff, so on and so forth. The effects are long, so I will not dwell on it further. But again, these are one of the things that have come from, this is an infinite game of navigating a continuously changing market. You need to learn it. If you're not, you need to develop your skills. You can't effectively learn just one thing and then expect you will do that thing for the rest of your time, and then you've solved everything. So that concept comes up in the collectors chapter. One other thing that comes up is, which I like to really re-emphasize, is the rate of change in the market and the industry collapse. If you looked at, again, Alex says himself all the time, if the floors he encountered, the prop trading floors, you'd see the physical brick and mortar floors that predominated in London in the early 2000s, you'd have 300-man floors, 150-man floors. Just imagining today to have this kind of size floors is crazy. The reason they're not so large anymore, or one of the reasons, is just because the industry changed so much, where volatility died out from 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015. But what didn't die out was, or what didn't change with that volatility, was the metagame. How do you think about what you're doing? How do you think about your career? What are we even doing as traders? Do you realize there's a metagame of thinking about what you're doing? Okay, meaning that people started in where the metagame was. You're a one product, one market trader. That's what you do. You have one strategy. If it stops working, your career's over. Go and do something else. A large part was this. No one was really thinking, okay, we're here to develop a skill set. How do we develop that skill set? How do I make myself multi-market? How do I make myself an all seasons trader to trade all different seasons? And that is just to make apparent, the whole important part about, if you start from there, that can answer a lot of your questions about what you should do next. If we have an extended period of volatility, low volatility in the next, perhaps not with Trump, maybe with Trump, what do you do then? Do you change products? Do you not change products? And you see how all of these questions, which I'm sure a lot of you are going to ask yourselves, all of these anxieties, it's fundamentally ask yourself, how do I develop my skills? How do I go to market? What are the things working now? What are the market phenomena that is working now? And move towards there. Lastly, I'd like to mention something critically important. And again, I'm mentioning all these things. I'm gunning them all down just because they're going to come up again and again in the series that we're doing with Jigsaw in much more applied and much more nuanced ways. But just so we're all on the same page here. One thing that is, again, not so much predominant in the early 2000s, the teams that were very successful did engage in this, is engaging in the extended mind. Collaborative environment between team members on the trading floor. There's a thinking that, it's a one person's game. It's an individualist pursuit. There are people who are much more aggressive, would say, you don't want to share edge. You don't want to give yourself away, and so on and so forth. And the only thing we could say is that the metagame, as it's evolved in our space, is everyone who's acted and thought as a team have all grown into huge traders. Everyone who's remained as an individualist has experienced the opposite. Very, very few people have remained as successful individualists. Everything else has gone downhill from there. Why? Because of the way you can leverage a trading floor, the way you can leverage a community, learning from each other horizontally and learning from those above you. I literally say, quite literally, those above you, like the guys on the first floor, the guys who are much more senior, the guys who are experienced, and how can you learn from everyone? Now, talking about learning, here is a problem because if you're an amazing learner, if you're a supple learner, if you were exactly how I was, meaning that I'm going to ask every single trader in the room, all the senior guys, what they think, what are they, what they like. I have a problem. What do you think about it? Okay. Fantastic. Eager to learn. You want to see that. But at one point, you're going to have to eventually make a decision, go your own way, back yourself, trust yourself. And that is very, very difficult. That is exactly what we talk about in chapter 7 of The Student, the antagonisms between learning and performing. You cannot overcome it. You become the ultimate learner, fantastic, in this environment. But all the processes and the habits that you have as a learner, you have to undo them when you become a performer. And this is very, very difficult. And it's something that we picked up a lot of the book. It's not just newbies, fresh in the industry. It's a lot of people who had to reinvent themselves. The story of the student and the Godfather in chapter 7 and chapter 7 and 8, fantastic traders in their own right. The Godfather, started very early days, very early 2000s, 2003, 2004, as a spread trader, then transitioned into an outright trader. That was a very, very difficult process. Like we say in the book, it was like learning to play squash, becoming an all-star squash champion. And then you then have to go play at tennis Wimbledon tomorrow, just having played squash your whole life. Okay. You can have a very bad time doing it. And so he had to change his habits and behaviors ingrained into him as a performer for 20 years. At the time, maybe let's say 15 years, back into a learner. And that was very difficult. So it's always at this crossroads of learning and performing. And we always thinking, how can we diagnose people to make this very explicit thing like, look, you're suffering right now because, you were learning, now you're being put live, now you have to perform, and all these different things happen. A lot of you guys are probably reading right now on the chart, so I won't go through all of them. But again, how your journaling changes, journaling from learning to reflecting, measuring your outcome by not measuring outcome by P&L and now measuring it by P&L, and so on and so forth. So it's all about how do I consciously learn all these, again, predicated on the fact that it all comes back from observation, coming back to the market's true nature, which is we're here to navigate them, we're here to constantly learn them. So you can't shut off your learning if you are a performer, and you can't shut off, you can't go vice versa. You need a bit of both, but it's what do you emphasize? I am just weary of the time, guys, here, so I will keep gunning down all these concepts, and then again, we'll revisit them. But here's the thing. In a complicated environment, you'll often experience a lot of child the one word I cannot say, prodigy. Yes, you all know what I mean. The Tiger Woods of the world in golf, musical prodigies. Oh, there, I said it. In people gone to do a massive music career in whatever they play, prodigies there, math prodigies, because these are basically environments where they're complicated perhaps, but they're best practices, speed of computation and thinking about them, even music, you can sort of quote unquote solve them. However, that is actually the opposite when you try and learn in a complex, multi-dynamic environment, which is trading. And the best performers, like we explore with the engineer, as we've seen in his career, is the slow learner, the slow brew trader. The engineer is a pioneering market profile strategic trader of 8 figures, potentially going on to 9 figures, who, if you know his story and you'll see in the book, was nearly cut many, many times in his early career because the learning was so slow, the performance wasn't there, although you could see the performance in other ways. And to the people who are used in the metagame of just trying to manage the traders based on what they've seen before, hadn't seen the trader emerging like this. And so, you know, so went on the rationale like, okay, maybe this guy's going to make it. Do we cut him? Do we not? But then they would have cut a fantastic pioneering trader, because the slow learning was the best learning. The slow learning we've seen with so many other traders. The people who hit the ground running and kept on running are actually in the minority. The best traders who emerged were all slow traders: the engineer, the hero, the student in his own ways, the godfather when he was reinventing. As I said, the majority fall into this category, even with the top traders. And this is constantly what we need to emphasize to a lot of the graduates, a lot of the young traders, that this environment is just so difficult and complex. It will take that long. Lastly, I'd like to bring up something very important, because I'm sure I'll be bringing it up in much more specific detail: the importance of trade sense. Now, trade sense is twofold. Trade sense is to understand, okay, now Trump is posting a lot on social media. He might be, perhaps some of the, not Trump himself, but some of the cabinet are speaking. Levitt might be coming on and making an announcement, so on and so forth. Is it worth for me to get into this trade when the announcement is in 2 hours? Probably not. So it's a lot of how do you manage yourself within the day or within the week. That's one thing. So again, context is important. You can't be linear and binary to play whack-a-mole to all these trades, when you have to understand where the injection of volatilities come from, and all these things that dominate the markets. Again, acting and thinking upstream. The other part of trade sense is how you navigate a trade dynamically in real time, which is the most fantastically complicated, difficult skill set to achieve and learn, which takes a long, long time, but is one of the main reasons why humans thrive in a dynamic world, which we now are in, because there's just so many things happening constantly. How you add into a trade, how you cut a trade. Do you not cut the trade? Do you go offside? Do you scale out? And all these multimodal things. And the more complex the market becomes, the only person to do this successfully over time is not a rules-based algorithm, is not an LLM. It's the ultimate black box in existence, the human, and a very highly trained human who can navigate this constant change. And again, the decision, and this, exactly to my point, that is how you should be thinking upstream. Because if you then look to downstream, if you're at a point where you might talk to the engineer and be like, okay, engineer, tell me how you took this trade, the rationale for how you sized this trade last week. He'll tell you all about it. Is it that relevant for how you're going to take the next that trade in 2 weeks' time? Some of it, like there might be gems in there, sure, but the context is going to be so different. The volatility is different. The market is different. The context of the market is so different that it won't really. It's up to you to answer those questions in real time. They might actually hurt you than help you. So again, it's just having that nuanced ability to navigate, rather than thinking, oh, engineer, give me a solution so I can then solve my problem of trading tomorrow. Now, I'm nearly wrapped up, so then we'll move into Q&A soon. So I think I'm good for time. But markets are here to be navigated, not solved. Navigation as a skill. Talking about the next thing, the illusion of progress. Because if you think they're here to be solved, you just think, okay, I just need to get a certain amount of knowledge. I need to know this kind of knowledge. I need to know more and more and more. I need to do more things. I need to add more things. I need to see more things. I need more indicators. And that just sends you in a deep circular rabbit hole where there is no progress, because you're not really training yourself as a skill set. Here's another thing. How many of us, I know I didn't, think about, I'm here to develop myself as a career. I'm here to develop a career which is going to be a lot longer than I think. I need to have all these skills to develop this career. It's going to change over time. How can I then also engage in recruiting my team, joining a team? How do I then how do I burn the boats? Because at one point you will have to do this full time. With a caveat, maybe some people will be able to actually figure out how to do it part-time. Fair enough. All I'm relaying is that the only true observation source I can see and write about and think about are, the most maximalist, diehard people upstairs. So that is what I see. I can't make assumptions over the people that could make it work part-time. Fair enough. Like that's just just from experience. But again, how do I orientate myself as a career? Okay, now I'm going to invest the time into really learning the profile, into deepening my observations of all this phenomena in the market. So I'm going to spend 2 months now not trading, just sitting there and watching the markets for 10 hours, rather than what I see, which is kind of like how we all do. If you're not a professional athlete, you might show up to the gym to do some random exercise. That's great. You will do some cardio or whatever, but that's not going to further your goals beyond the first 2 months. You're not, if you're an athlete, you'll be like, okay, what are my skills? Okay, I need to improve my agility here. How do I improve my agility? Okay, I do all these things to improve my agility. Okay, I'm not fast enough. How do I improve my acceleration from a 100-meter sprint? Okay, this is how I'm going to do it. And I'm going to do all that throughout the year at different intervals. So as another way to think about it, which is how I think a lot of what Axia has done is really put that into the metagame, thinking yourself as a professional athlete. What does that mean? And as you said there, as it says there, it all comes back down to something I talked about with the engineer, which is what's the main difference for professional traders? You can say in one word, it's thinking holistically. It's thinking about ourselves as a career. It's thinking yourself, okay, I'm approaching my skill set like this. What does that mean organically? What's my place in the market? What does this mean for us to be a prop trader? What does it mean for us to trade futures? And really understanding the nuance of these kind of things. And as I said there, have you ever considered that there is a metagame? There is an evolving way we look at ourselves as traders. What will be the predominant metagame in 10 years, I cannot tell you. The person to dominate that the metagame is being developed right now by those people at the cutting edge, the people upstairs, the people in the book, and the people at a prop firm like Axia. That's just my world. I'm sure at other firms too, are advancing the metagame further. And the metagame will always come from what the markets are doing. So if there is one quote I will love for you guys to take away, maybe some of them, more than one, but it's something I will write about one day, I think, in the Asymmetrist. The original sin of a trader is attempting to make an infinite process finite. And everything goes from there. Your success as a trader, your failure as a trader is dealing with this problem, this contradiction that the markets are an infinite process, they're an infinite auction. And every time we try and make them, we try to be reductive. We try to make them finite because we are finite ourselves as humans, that we can only comprehend so much. We try and cut them down through, we try and separate the data, thinking about the days range, a daily chart, profiles segmenting into half-an-hour intervals, so on and so forth. We have to deal with this crazy fire hose of infinite data and change that comes from the markets. And the trader that succeeds the most is who can make it the least finite, i.e., who can stick to that market's infinity, who can stick to the complexity of the markets, is a trader that wins. The trader that takes themselves away from the markets and make them too finite, too reductive, you box yourself in by, I'm a technical trader who does only just this one thing, has made the market so finite. It's why it's so difficult for you to stick to the infinite change of the markets. Again, I know that sounds very grandiose, but again, I just think that's, if you keep that quote in your head and just think, am I being too finite here? Am I not letting myself just be with the market and really understand it holistically? This is so much of the language and so much of the thinking that predominates in everyone in the book. So many of the guys upstairs on the floors, very implicitly and explicitly. Some people might say all these things very implicitly in their own way, but it comes back down to this phrase, of trying to make an infinite process finite. And hopefully, again, a lot of your downstream questions and anxieties, how do I go from here, are all answered by this fact. Can I think upstream? Can I think a bit more holistically? And we'll be talking more about that in the series with, that I'll be doing with Jigsaw in the next few weeks. Before I wrap up and before we get into the Q&A, if anyone is interested and wants to know more about the book, I can only recommend that you go on tradersofourtime.com, because you can get chapter 1 for free by signing up. And chapter 1, which you'll find by signing up, is a chapter about the trading desks themselves, which is a fantastic way for people to understand what's the book like, how we're meeting all the traders in the book for the first time. Again, we're talking about a very, very special firm, floor, 7 to 8 figure traders, people who've been pushing that. The firm is that floor has only added new members that, when we made this book, we captured people at a moment in time in 2021, 22. So many more people have grown and come to that floor since then. And you can discover the floor and the way we look at markets, the way we do things. And you can get that free by signing up on tradersofourtime.com. Now, there is one other thing you can do, which I highly recommend for one thing, for many different reasons, but I'll highlight perhaps one of the most important. If you sign up and you hit, can I get free educational content, which comes directly sourced from Axia, I recommend it. Why? What is going on upstairs right now directly influences the training and then the education that Axia does at all times. It's like direct to source. It's how everyone who comes through the gates, who end up through the so many different ways that people are funded and trained and go onto the desks, they all come through the same education and training. And so I can highly recommend that you also are willing to sign up to get the chapter, but also to engage in with the educational content that Axia provides. So without further ado, thank you so much, guys and ladies. And I think we can do a bit of Q&A, Gonzalo. Sorry, Gonzalo. I might be my end. I only just started hearing you. You cut off at the beginning. Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Yes, all good. Thank you.
Okay, good. So I was saying great takeaways. I have a question. How's the fastest way for a retail home trader to really learn that markets are not a mathematical problem to be solved, right? Because I ask because
yeah,
I learned the hard way. I tried buying systems. I tried algorithms. So how can we learn that not that hard way?
Yeah, unfortunately, I would concede that you do have to go through this. There is the hard way, just because it's natural. I mean, like so much of the world, if you think about it, like everything from the education system, like you grew up in an education system where there are the right answers, there are ways to solve this exam by having the answers. Everything in the world, even other jobs, other domains, even, gives you success by having the answers, by reading the right books, by doing the right things. So it's a very difficult implicit assumption for people to overcome. So it will require a lot of, hitting your head against the wall and being like, what the hell is any of this is, right? However, if there is one thing, like just like gun to my head, what do you have to do? I would just say quite literally, sit in front of a price ladder, look at the order flow coming in across one market and then build it up to a few markets across different asset classes. So one market for you to really understand and not trade it. I don't mean clicking around and trading it. I mean quite literally sitting and watching. The second you start trading it, you're going to think of too many complicated things and you're going to be trying to solve things. It doesn't matter. You're here you're on an alien. As I said, if someone said gun to my head, I'll be telling a trader who just walked in right now, I'd be like, okay, you're now in an alien strange world. You have no idea what's going on. Look at this thing. I'm going to come back in 1 month and I want you to tell me all the things you've observed. Then next month, I'm going to come back and add a few more markets and then tell me how one influences the other. And from that insane, you might seem very specific thing, it's actually everything, because then you can then pick up observations. That person, I'm sure, has already noticed so many patterns or phenomena in the market, and they can already start devising strategies by themselves. And because they observe all of these, they start building up confidence in their observations. They can then rely on themselves to apply these strategies. And then every time they execute, they're not going to second guess, because I've experienced this myself. Someone has given me a strategy. I try and apply it, but I'm second guessing. Is this the right strategy? Am I doing it the way they should be doing it? Am I, and you haven't done the work and you haven't built these things yourself, which is why it's very difficult to articulate what you're doing and confidence and so on. So that's probably the most simple way I can answer that, Gonzalo, I'm afraid. But it will involve a lot of hardship to bang your head against the wall. Yeah, unfortunately.
Thank you.
I will just pull up my questions here. So yeah, please send them in, guys. Any questions we answer, that would be great. Any questions we don't answer, I'm sure we can do in the other series as well. Don't be shy. Don't be afraid. Get them in.
Hello? Can you hear me? I think I was muted.
Perhaps a silly question, my end, Gonzalo. But are the participants enabled to send their questions in as well?
Yes, I have 45 questions. Do you want me to
Oh,
read
sorry,
some?
I can't see them, unfortunately. I'm not sure how.
Okay.
So, sorry, guys, for this teething issues
Okay.
again.
Yeah. Robert asked, does the book or will the seminar explain and discuss how to implement the concept of navigating the markets to enable retail traders to be successful?
Yes. So the book goes into it at length in a very specific way, and I'll explain what that is. And more specifically, yes. So, like, I know this was a very high level, very meta, and you might be like, okay, what the hell was that? But as the series go through, that I'm doing with Jigsaw, where like next time we're looking at three traders specifically in a lot more detail and understanding, for example, how they navigate, how they think about navigating, getting into their brain, and then in a lot more applied ways. But I couldn't answer that well without answering this to begin with, if that makes sense. The book does that specifically in a way where, so yes, I mean, even has very specific traits. It has their traits. It gets you into their brain and thinking how they've applied it, but even looking at very specific applications there. But it's always how should I say? It's always sticking to this point that could we give you guys like one strategy and go off into the sunset? Well, that's kind of antithetical to everything we kind of explore, what we think, how we think about the book, how we're thinking about the book's usefulness. Is that if you can make you aware of all these things, theoretically you should go on and do all these things yourself, which is the only way you can do it, basically.
Think upstream. Can you hear me?
Yes, Gonzalo. Yes.
Yes. Don't ask. When using the phrase "think upstream," does that mean look back to see what has happened?
Mm. Yeah, great question, actually. So think upstream can be applied in quite a few ways. To answer your question directly, yes. It's also a way to diagnose different problems. It's also a way to constantly remind yourself, okay, am I getting lost in the tiny details here which kind of don't matter? To give you a very concrete example, and a very recent one, you will notice that we now entered a period now where whatever happens on a given day, Trump and his or the cabinet and or the administration about how they're putting on tariffs, how they're not putting on tariffs, how they're tariffing everyone, not tariffing, is obviously a very dominant factor. However, that has changed dramatically. How that affects markets was very different in April than they are now. So what happens is when you're very early in these kind of themes, when tariffs are very fresh, anything with tariff will move markets. Any comment, any headline, any CNBC appearance. But then, markets get very adjusted to this very quickly. And so you have to start thinking a bit more upstream. It's not hitting every single thing. Okay, headline, boom. Okay, this sounds bad. Oh, short S&P. Boom, headline. Okay, this sounds good. Okay, long S&P. You enter very much more nuanced things. So then you're thinking, okay, I'm not going to hit all the headlines because now I'm just going to give back everything plus more. And this is where the real skill happens. Okay. You're now going to have to think more upstream, thinking, okay, what's the current narrative? What has happened so far? Where is the market sensitivity still kind of primed? And what's the big thing that needs to happen right now that will dominate Yeah, so upstream that will dominate everything else. uh, last, 2 weeks ago, it was like, okay, there's now something about Trump and the European Union. Boom, 50% headline, straight to the point. There wasn't like, maybe they'll do this, maybe not. It's a very direct, very upstream, 50% tariff, move the markets, bang. Um, and it kind of affected secondary and tertiary flows since then, Let me give you another example. We haven't had it for a while. It's hopefully you'll notice this as well during central bank meetings, trading central bank meetings, which is a huge edge, huge Axia specialism. It's a huge edge. A lot of the guys like the Warrior engage in. You read about it in the book. Uh, Trading those meetings is very difficult, but essentially, you'll have the chairman Powell or Lagarde, whoever in whatever period of time we're talking about, Draghi back in the day. They'll say a lot of things. The markets will move up and down a lot, but they'll just say one thing, which determines everything else. So always thinking upstream, where's that one thing, and then you go crazy and you trade that thing. You don't get lost in the smaller flows and so on. So that's like a very specific example, and hopefully you can transplant then. Let's say you have a much more technical based trading framework. Maybe just think, what's the one thing I need to see that just cracks everything and has confirmed to me, and then it dominates everything else, wherever that may be. So it can be applied in different contexts. Hopefully, I've done justice to your question.
Yeah. All right. We have 73 questions. Of course, we'll not have time
Yeah.
to answer them all.
Yeah.
Just a couple of more, if you have 5 minutes, Bogdan.
No, of course, of
Volker,
course.
yeah. How did your own trading evolve while you were working with these traders and working on the book?
Yeah, fantastic question. So, I mean, it evolved into a point where, like, basically, I had to make a very, how should I say it? I mean, it's difficult now to think how I was as a person and as a trader back before the book. It's kind of like I feel like I've been giving such a, like, my soul is being transplanted and my brain is being transplanted to be so like these people have lived in my head, if that makes sense. And they still live in my head. And hopefully the book actually does that to a lot of people. They can live in your head for the better to then cause change and effect in your own trading. So it's kind of like going through an identity crisis where like there's so much edge, and I know how to trade that edge in the news, and also understanding how the engineer approaches, for example, the market profile and everything else. But this is what I mentioned earlier, so I guess I could answer it here. I had a very weird situation, where a very unique opportunity where the book was done, and it's like the only thing I want to do with my whole life is to come back and specialize and come back to prop. Door was wide open, but then there was a huge opportunity to think, well, the book is being launched. Doing this asymmetrist thing is now a once in a lifetime opportunity, more than what, even more than trading. Let me do this now. It's the only thing I want to do more than trading. And, to sort of eat my own medicine, I know very well I can't do both. So, now I do asymmetrist full time. I'm not trading now full time. Will I come back to trading? Very good question. We'll see. But for now, I'm just focused on building asymmetrist. Whereas I'm now on the floor constantly, but instead of trading, I'm on the floor writing about the guys and thinking, how about the space, and doing that for a very specific reason. You can't do both, and I wouldn't want to do both badly, if that makes sense.
Cool. Okay, last question, Anthony. Do you have a process for people to shift their mindset? I think maybe it's regarding the complex and not complicated things. And I had almost the same question. How do you manage the junior traders at Axia? Do they come with a blank slate, or do you have to explain these concepts to them?
Yeah. So, yeah, fantastic question. I'm just trying to think of how to
Yeah.
summarize the whole thing very quickly. And yes, in a way, a lot of the way how people come through the gates, shall we say, onto the floors from the junior level, myself included, we've seen everything. So we've seen people who are complete blank slates, like don't know anything about markets, and there's people who've been trying to make trading work for a very long time. They're very deep and knowledgeable, but they haven't constructed the Lego pieces in a certain way to make it work for them, if that makes sense. But that's the only way you can do it. Again, a whole other 1 hour conversation. It's how you construct the thing yourself uniquely is your trading. But it's essentially coming back to the main point that you are at the desk, you are there observing and being immersed at your desk as much as possible. Through that immersion process, not only are you observing the market phenomena, but now you have the blessing, and I say this half as a joke, the curse of having all these different traders around you. And now you have to do the extremely difficult job to also learn from them from so many different skill sets, from news trading to market profile trading with, the ladder. And that journey is actually very unique for everyone. Like a lot of people might just model themselves really well. We had this, with one graduate in the Cyprus office. There's a Cyprus office in Axia who's modeled himself on the warrior and news trading, and he's had a lot of success doing that because he feels like that's the edge. He resonates with that kind of style, this very flow correlation news trading. But he's still like he understands how the warrior trades. He gets into his brain, but he's still done the application and execution of those trades in his own very unique way. And again, that's kind of the only way, well, at least the way I've seen it and the way, everyone, I think a lot involved with the book and Axia can tell you it's the only way you can do it, just because, as I said, you got to back yourself. You got to have conviction. You got to understand the context of what you're doing. No one can do that for you, right? So it's how do you build people the skill set and confidence to do that? How can you expose to them to new things? So like a news trader, someone might be growing up as a news trader, but then all of a sudden, I'll give you a concrete example. The hero. He grew up very price ladder focused. In fact, he had no charts on his computer when he came into trading. Very price ladder focused, and he had a very close mentor relationship with the warrior, who's very news driven. But he was like, "I'm price ladder first. I'm flow first." But his trading was really unlocked when Alex put him a lot closer this time with the engineer, who's very profile driven, and all of a sudden the profile plus his very intense order flow skills on the ladder he learned for like 2 years, 3 years suddenly unlocked itself and grew his career massively because, as he said in his own words, the profile gave him context for when to go big on a trade and so many other things. So that was his natural evolution. But I know I might be like, okay, just give me something here concrete. But the thing is, each person who emerges as a trader does so in their own unique way. And again, it can't really be any other way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. That for sure. All right, guys. Thank you, Bogdan, and thank you, guys, for your time and your questions. You will be hosting. There will be a recording available. So,
Yep.
and we'll be hosting more sessions like this in the future. So keep an eye on your inbox. And yeah, thanks, Bogdan. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Gonzalo. Thank you to Jigsaw and everyone, and thank you most of all to everyone attending. I hope you've all enjoyed it. I'll try and see if I can grab some of the questions from the chat if Zoom doesn't get rid of all of them. And in doing so, hopefully we can maybe just get a few of those questions that were not answered today that can dovetail into the next session, and so we can keep a nice loop for all involved.
Sure. I'll make sure we collect all the questions.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Thank you, guys. Bye.